I never imagined that a quiet suburban street, with freshly cut lawns and mailboxes lined like soldiers, could become the battlefield of my life. That Monday morning, the sun hit the rooftops just right, and the smell of wet grass lingered in the air. I was sipping my coffee on the porch, savoring the warmth, when I first heard the sharp, mocking laugh that would haunt me for weeks. It was her, Karen, the neighborhood's self-brick, blamed enforcer, peering over my fence like a hawk. "Oh, is that the best you could do?" she jeered, pointing at the barely noticeable chain link fence separating our yards. Her voice cut through the air like ice. I frowned, setting my mug down carefully, feeling the heat of embarrassment rise to my cheeks. "Excuse me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but she didn't even glance at me. She was too busy snapping pictures, probably to report me to the HOA for some imagined offense. The sound of her phone camera clicking repeatedly was maddening, each snap a hammer against my peace. I could hear the faint hum of sprinklers, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, all blending with the intensity of this moment. "Honestly, who builds a fence like this in 2025? She continued, her voice dripping with derision. I clenched my fists, trying to ignore the throbbing anger in my temples. The neighborhood had always been quiet, predictable, and now here was Karen, making herself the center of chaos. I stepped closer, my boots crunching softly against the gravel path, and said, "It's a fence. It keeps my dog safe, that's all." Her laugh echoed again, sharper this time. "Safe? You call this safe?" She shook her head, walking closer so that she could practically lean over and scrutinize my property like it was a crime scene. "Do you even know the HOA regulations?" I could hear her voice echoing down the street. A couple of neighbors had started peeking over their hedges, whispering, sensing that something explosive was about to happen. My chest tightened. I had always been a law-abiding resident, but this was personal now. I tried reasoning, stepping up my tone but keeping it calm. I followed every guideline. "If there's a problem, show me the rule. Don't just yell and take pictures." Her response was a derisive snort, like the sound of a small animal scuttling across the pavement. Rules are for people like you, not perfectionists like me," she spat. Each word felt like it left a mark, piercing deeper than the last. The next hour was chaos. My neighbors gathered on the street, whispers of concern and disapproval rising like wind against fragile glass. Karen kept pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly, brandishing her phone like a weapon. Every time I tried to step forward, she stepped back, smirking, retreating like a predator sizing up its prey. The tension was unbearable. My hands shook slightly as I tried to compose myself, tasting the bitter edge of fear mixed with anger. I realized then that this wasn't just about offense. It was about control. Her authority, imaginary as it might be, was suffocating the neighborhood. I felt a surge of determination rise through me, hot and unyielding. I wouldn't let her continue mocking me, not here, not now. There had to be a way to turn this around, to assert myself without stooping to her level. But at that moment, as I stared into her eyes, calculating her next move, I knew the confrontation had just begun, and I had no idea how far it would go. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every humiliating moment. Her laughter, the way she strutted like she owned the street, it all burned in my mind. I could still hear the faint echo of neighbors whispering behind their curtains, caught in the spectacle she had created. I knew I couldn't let this slide. Not only was my pride on the line, but the principle of respect of boundaries demanded it. The next morning, I walked outside with a plan. I had spent hours measuring, drawing, and envisioning a barrier that would end her interference once and for all. My hands gripped the cold metal tape measure, the edges cutting slightly into my skin, a reminder of the labor and determination that lay ahead. The air smelled faintly of damp soil as I dug my first post hole, the thud of the shovel against the ground resonating in my chest. Each strike was methodical, deliberate, a silent message that I would no longer be humiliated. By mid-morning, Karen appeared again. I wasn't surprised. She hovered at the edge of my property, arms crossed, smirk still plastered across her face. "Building another eyesore?" she asked, her tone mocking. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I wiped sweat from my brow, letting the dust cling to my skin and hair, and simply continued digging. Her frown deepened as she realized I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of engaging in petty words. "You think you're clever, huh?" she hissed finally, stepping closer. I kept working, feeling the soil crumble between my fingers, the sun baking my back. The neighbors watched from a safe distance, their murmurs creating a low hum of tension. Each glance I caught from them was a mix of curiosity and concern. She made a step forward, then another, clearly contemplating how far she could push me. I paused, leaning on the shovel, letting the silence stretch before replying. "I'm building a wall," I said quietly, letting my words hang in the air. She laughed sharply, a harsh, grating sound. "A wall, against me?" I nodded, my jaw tight, the muscles in my arms tensing. "You'll see it every day, every single time you step outside. This isn't just a fence anymore." The tension escalated instantly. She muttered something under her breath, her face twisting, before storming back toward her house, phone still clutched in hand. I could hear her muttering to neighbors as she passed, attempting to rally support. But something shifted in the crowd. They were no longer just silent witnesses. They were judging her audacity, the sharp injustice of mocking a neighbor over nothing. The balance of power, however, was still uncertain. I worked tirelessly over the next few days, the scent of fresh, cut wood, sawdust, and wet cement filling the air. Sweat poured down my face, my hands blistered, but every strike of the hammer was a pulse of determination. By the third day, the wall started to take shape, all imposing, solid. It wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a statement, a monument to standing up against relentless ridicule. Karen appeared again that afternoon, her eyes widening as she approached. "You dared," she started but stopped mid-sentence. The neighbors had gathered more closely, whispers now audible and pointed. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement that she had overstepped. I felt a subtle shift, a sense of moral justice hovering, waiting to tip the scales. I didn't speak. I just kept hammering, my hands raw, the sun reflecting off the nearly finished wall. I could feel her fury simmering as she backed away, muttering threats I barely heard over the pounding of wood against frame. Something inside me told me this wasn't over. Her ego wouldn't allow it. But as I wiped sweat from my forehead, I caught sight of a small, peculiar detail. A hidden camera lens poking from the corner of her house, aimed directly at my property. That discovery sent a chill down my spine. The wall was almost complete, but now I knew there was more lurking beneath the surface. A secret she thought I'd never uncover. By the time the wall was complete, it was impossible to ignore. The structure was formidable, rising 6 feet tall, smooth, freshly painted, every plank meticulously aligned. The sunlight reflected off the rich brown of the wood, almost daring her to continue her mockery. I stood back, hands on my hips, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. It was more than just a wall, it was a symbol. Karen arrived as usual, though this time her steps were hesitant. This is extreme," she said, her voice cracking. I could see her shaking slightly, her confidence beginning to falter. The neighbors were out in force, some taking videos, others whispering approvingly. There was no hiding her intimidation now. I took a deep breath, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the earthy scent of soil, and let her glare simmer. "I didn't build it for you," I said calmly, letting each word linger. "I built it to reclaim my peace, to remind you that no one can belittle me without consequences." She opened her mouth, probably to respond, but the murmur of the crowd drowned her out. I realized then that the balance had shifted. Where she once commanded attention with fear, now she faced collective disapproval. Her mask of control was cracking. Then came the twist. One of the neighbors approached me cautiously, a knowing look in their eyes. "I think you should see what she's been recording," they whispered. I followed them to the side of her house, and my stomach sank. Cameras, hidden microphones, even notes detailing every minor infraction of residents. It was obsessive, invasive. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a danger, a manipulator hiding behind the veil of HOA rules. I immediately documented everything, taking photos and videos. Within days, the HOA called her in, and the legal process began. She tried to deny everything, but the evidence was undeniable. The irony wasn't lost on me. The wall I built to block her sight had exposed her secrets instead. I couldn't help but feel vindicated as I watched her finally face accountability. With Karen gone from her self-appointed throne of terror, the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual calm. People greeted me differently now, with nods of respect and smiles that had been missing during those tense days. I felt a sense of moral justice, not just for me, but for everyone who had witnessed the cruelty firsthand. The wall remained a daily reminder of the strength it takes to stand up for yourself. Standing behind it, I often reflect on that time. The anger, the fear, the uncertainty. It all taught me one thing: control and mockery can be resisted. No matter how powerful someone seems, their influence ends where your courage begins. And sometimes, the best way to reclaim peace isn't with words alone. It's with action that speaks louder than any insult.